What if the most profound prophecy about humanity's future was hidden in plain sight for over 80 years, spoken by a man who never claimed to be a prophet, yet accurately predicted world wars, economic collapses, and technological breakthroughs decades before they occurred? What if this same man, lying unconscious on a simple couch in Virginia Beach, revealed details about the Second Coming that no theologian, no scholar, and no religious authority has ever dared to discuss publicly? His name was Edgar Cayce, and between 1901 and 1944, he delivered over 14,000 documented readings while in a deep trance state. These weren't vague predictions or mystical poetry. They were specific, detailed visions of events that would reshape the world. And among his most startling revelations were those concerning the return of the Christ consciousness to earth. But here's what makes Cayce's vision so revolutionary. He didn't speak of a single figure descending from the clouds with trumpets and angels. Instead, he described something far more mysterious and infinitely more personal. A transformation that would begin in the hearts of ordinary people, spreading like wildfire across the globe until humanity itself became the vessel for divine consciousness. If you've ever felt that something monumental is stirring beneath the surface of our chaotic world, if you've sensed that we're approaching a spiritual crossroads unlike anything in human history, then what you're about to discover will illuminate why these feelings have been growing stronger with each passing year. Before we dive into Cayce's most profound revelations, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. We explore the forgotten prophecies and hidden spiritual truths that mainstream sources won't touch. Every video is designed to awaken something deep within you, something that remembers what's truly possible for humanity. Now, let me take you back to a quiet afternoon in 1934, when Edgar Cayce, surrounded by a small group of seekers, entered his legendary trance state and began speaking words that would challenge everything the world believed about the Second Coming. To understand the magnitude of what Cayce revealed, we must first grasp who this man truly was. Born in rural Kentucky in 1877, Edgar Cayce discovered his extraordinary gift by accident. As a young man struggling with a throat ailment that left him nearly voiceless, he underwent hypnosis as a last resort. But something unprecedented happened. While under hypnosis, Cayce began diagnosing his own condition in a voice clear and strong, prescribing treatments that would restore his speech completely. Word spread quickly through the small town, and soon people were traveling from across the country to receive readings from this unassuming man who seemed to access infinite wisdom while unconscious. But Cayce's abilities extended far beyond medical diagnosis. In his trance state, he spoke of past lives, future events, ancient civilizations, and spiritual laws, with an authority that left even skeptics speechless. What set Cayce apart from other psychics or spiritual teachers was his remarkable accuracy. He predicted the stock market crash of 1929, the beginning and end of both world wars, the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and technological advances that wouldn't emerge for decades. His medical readings, documented by physicians of his time, showed success rates that defied conventional understanding. But perhaps most significantly, Cayce never claimed these insights as his own. He insisted that in his trance state, he was simply accessing what he called the Akashic Records, a cosmic library containing the complete history and future of every soul. And it was from this vast repository of divine knowledge that his most profound prophecies about the Second Coming emerged. In reading 3976-15, delivered in January 1934, Cayce spoke of a time when the earth itself would undergo dramatic changes, not as punishment, but as preparation for a new age of spiritual awakening. He described these upheavals as birth pangs, necessary contractions that would herald the emergence of something unprecedented in human history. But here's where Cayce's vision diverges radically from traditional Christian eschatology. He didn't speak of the Second Coming as a single dramatic event occurring at a specific moment in time. Instead, he described it as a gradual awakening of Christ consciousness within individual souls across the globe. This wasn't about one man returning to save humanity. This was about humanity itself awakening to its divine nature. In reading 57:49-4, Cayce explained that the Christ is not a person, but a consciousness, a state of perfect alignment between human will and divine purpose. He said that Jesus of Nazareth was the first soul to fully embody this consciousness, but he was never meant to be the last. The second coming, according to Cayce, would manifest as countless individuals awakening to this same divine awareness, creating a critical mass of spiritual transformation that would shift the entire planet. This revelation was so radical that even Cayce's closest associates struggled to accept it. They had been raised in traditional Christian households, taught to expect the literal return of Jesus in physical form. But Cayce's readings painted a different picture entirely. He spoke of a time when ordinary people would begin experiencing extraordinary spiritual gifts, when the veil between physical and spiritual realms would thin dramatically, and when the very frequency of human consciousness would elevate to match the Christ vibration. What makes this prophecy even more compelling is how accurately it describes what we're witnessing today. Across the globe, millions of people are reporting profound spiritual experiences. Meditation and mindfulness practices, once confined to monasteries and ashrams, are now taught in schools, hospitals, and corporate boardrooms. Ancient healing modalities are being validated by modern science. People from all walks of life are awakening to psychic abilities, having visions, and feeling called to serve something greater than themselves. In reading 11:52-11, Cayce described the signs that would herald this spiritual awakening. He spoke of a time when humanity would face unprecedented challenges, when old systems and structures would crumble, when people would feel lost and disconnected from traditional sources of meaning. But he also said that in the midst of this apparent chaos, a new kind of human being would emerge. These individuals, Cayce explained, would carry within their very cells a different vibrational frequency. They would be naturally drawn to healing, to service, to truth. They would feel an inexplicable knowing that they came to Earth for a specific purpose, even if that purpose wasn't immediately clear to them. Most importantly, they would recognize each other, forming networks of awakened souls that would serve as anchors of light during humanity's transformation. Does this sound familiar? If you're watching this video, there's a strong possibility that you're experiencing some of these very sensations. That restless feeling that you're meant for something more. That growing awareness that the world as you've known it is shifting in ways both visible and invisible. That magnetic pull towards spiritual truth that grows stronger each day, regardless of your religious background or previous beliefs. Cayce insisted that this awakening wouldn't be confined to any single religion, culture, or geographic region. In reading 39:76-29, he stated that the new spiritual awareness would emerge simultaneously across the globe, transcending all human divisions. Christians would find deeper meaning in their faith. Buddhists would experience profound enlightenment. Muslims would feel closer to Allah. Jews would remember their covenant with the divine. And those who had never considered themselves religious would suddenly find themselves in direct communion with the sacred. This global spiritual renaissance, according to Cayce, would not eliminate religious diversity, but would reveal the common thread of divine truth running through all authentic spiritual traditions. People would begin to understand that while the external forms of worship might differ, the inner experience of divine connection remains universal. But Cayce's vision of the second coming wasn't all gentle awakening and peaceful transformation. He also spoke of a period of intense testing, a time when humanity would be forced to choose between the old consciousness of separation and fear, and the new consciousness of unity and love. This choosing time, as he called it, would separate those ready for spiritual evolution from those still clinging to material illusion. And according to his readings, that time is now. In reading 2012-01, delivered in 1939, Cayce described this period of choosing as the most critical juncture in human history. He spoke of souls who had incarnated specifically for this moment, ancient beings who had walked through previous civilizations and witnessed the rise and fall of spiritual ages. These souls, he said, would find themselves inexplicably drawn to awakening during the transition period, serving as bridges between the old world and the new. What's remarkable about this prophecy is how it explains the intense spiritual hunger so many people are experiencing today. That deep ache for meaning, that sense of being homesick for a place you've never been, that feeling of remembering something just beyond the edge of conscious recall. According to Cayce, these aren't psychological symptoms or existential crises. They're the stirrings of soul memory, the awakening of divine consciousness that has been dormant for lifetimes. But here's where Cayce's vision becomes both beautiful and challenging. He insisted that this awakening couldn't be forced or rushed. In reading 281-13, he explained that spiritual evolution follows natural law just as surely as physical growth. You cannot make a seed sprout by pulling on it. You can only provide the right conditions and trust the process. Similarly, the Christ consciousness awakens in each soul according to divine timing, influenced by factors that extend far beyond our current understanding. This is why some people seem to awaken overnight, while others struggle for years with spiritual seeking. It's not about worthiness or effort. It's about readiness, about the complex interplay of karma, soul purpose, and cosmic timing that governs all spiritual development. Cayce emphasized that judgment has no place in this process. Every soul will awaken when the conditions are right, and no soul will be left behind. Yet even as he spoke of divine patience and perfect timing, Cayce also issued urgent warnings about the window of opportunity facing humanity. In reading 3976-24, he described the current era as a pivotal moment when the spiritual destiny of the entire planet hangs in the balance. He spoke of a cosmic clock ticking toward a moment of reckoning when humanity would either graduate to a higher level of consciousness or face the consequences of spiritual stagnation. The signs of this approaching climax, according to Cayce, would be unmistakable. Natural disasters would increase in frequency and intensity as the Earth herself responded to humanity's spiritual condition. Political and economic systems would reveal their fundamental instability. Traditional sources of authority would lose credibility as people began trusting their inner guidance more than external institutions. And most significantly, the veil between dimensions would begin to lift, allowing unprecedented communication between physical and spiritual realms. Does any of this sound familiar? Look around at the world today. Climate change accelerating beyond all scientific predictions. Governments worldwide facing unprecedented challenges to their legitimacy. Economic inequality reaching levels not seen since before the last great spiritual awakening. And everywhere, people reporting experiences that mainstream science cannot explain. Prophetic dreams, healing miracles, telepathic connections, encounters with beings of light. In reading 5748-6, Cayce described how these phenomena would intensify as the Second Coming approached its fullness. He spoke of children being born with natural psychic abilities that previous generations had to develop through years of training. He predicted that healing through spiritual means would become so common that the medical establishment would be forced to acknowledge and integrate these methods. Most remarkably, he foresaw a time when communication with deceased loved ones would become as normal as telephone conversations. But perhaps most intriguingly, Cayce spoke of physical changes that would occur in human beings as they awakened to Christ consciousness. In reading 294-185, he described a transformation at the cellular level, a literal rewiring of the nervous system, that would allow these awakened individuals to perceive and interact with higher dimensions of reality. He called these beings the new humans, and he insisted they were already being born in increasing numbers. These new humans, according to Cayce, would be recognized not by their appearance, but by their presence. They would emanate a quality of peace and love that others would find irresistibly attractive. They would possess an intuitive understanding of spiritual law that would allow them to perform what others might call miracles. Most importantly, they would remember their connection to the divine source with such clarity that fear and separation would become impossible for them. The implications of this prophecy extend far beyond individual awakening. Cayce described how these awakened souls would naturally gravitate toward each other, forming communities of practice that would serve as laboratories for the new civilization. These communities wouldn't be isolated communes or exclusive religious orders. They would be networks of conscious individuals working within existing society to transform it from within. In reading 3976 or 8, Cayce painted a vivid picture of how this transformation would unfold. He spoke of awakened teachers entering school systems and revolutionizing education by teaching children to access their intuitive wisdom alongside intellectual knowledge. He described healers working within hospitals to demonstrate the power of spiritual medicine. He envisioned business leaders guided by divine principles, creating economic systems based on cooperation rather than competition. This wasn't utopian fantasy in Cayce's view. It was inevitable evolution, the natural result of enough souls awakening to their divine nature and choosing to express that nature in practical, world-changing ways. He insisted that once a critical mass of awakened individuals was reached, the transformation of human civilization would accelerate exponentially, creating what he called the new Earth. But Cayce was equally clear that this transformation wouldn't happen automatically. In reading 1602-3, he emphasized that the Second Coming required active participation from awakened souls. It wasn't enough to have mystical experiences or spiritual insights. Those experiences had to be translated into concrete action, into lives lived in service to the greater good, into choices that consistently aligned with love rather than fear. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of Cayce's prophecy. It places the responsibility for humanity's spiritual evolution squarely on the shoulders of those who are awakening. No savior is coming to rescue us from our challenges. No divine intervention will solve our problems without our participation. The Second Coming, in Cayce's vision, is a collaborative effort between heaven and earth, between divine consciousness and human will. And this brings us to the most profound revelation in all of Cayce's readings about the Second Coming. In reading 262-87, delivered during one of his final trance sessions, he spoke of what he called the Great Recognition. He described a moment when enough souls would awaken simultaneously that a wave of divine consciousness would sweep across the planet, awakening millions more in a single instant. This wasn't gradual evolution, but quantum leap, a tipping point where individual awakenings would merge into collective transformation so powerful that it would be felt by every living being on Earth. Cayce said this moment would be preceded by what he called the final choosing, a period when every soul would be confronted with an unmistakable choice between the old consciousness of separation and the new consciousness of unity. The signs leading up to this great recognition would be impossible to ignore. Cayce spoke of a time when the artificial boundaries between nations would begin dissolving as people recognized their fundamental interconnectedness. He described economic systems based on scarcity, giving way to abundance consciousness as awakened souls demonstrated new ways of creating and sharing resources. Most remarkably, he predicted that death itself would lose its terror as the veil between physical and spiritual realms became so thin that communication with departed souls would be commonplace. But here's what makes Cayce's vision so relevant to our current moment. He insisted that this transformation was not scheduled for some distant future. In reading 1602-6, he stated that the souls incarnating in the early decades of the 20th century were specifically chosen to witness and participate in humanity's greatest spiritual awakening. These were ancient souls, he said, who had experienced previous civilizations and understood the cosmic significance of what was unfolding. If Cayce was correct, then many of you watching this video right now are among those chosen souls. That restless feeling you carry, that sense of being called to something greater, that inexplicable knowing that you came here for a purpose beyond ordinary existence, these aren't random feelings. They're soul memories stirring to life, divine consciousness awakening within human form. In his final readings about the Second Coming, Cayce offered specific guidance for those who felt called to participate in this great awakening. He emphasized the importance of daily meditation, not as escape from the world, but as attunement to divine will. He spoke of the necessity of service, of using whatever gifts and abilities one possessed in service to the greater good. Most importantly, he stressed that awakening was not a solitary journey, but a collective endeavor requiring cooperation and mutual support among like-minded souls. The communities of awakened beings that Cayce envisioned weren't meant to withdraw from society, but to transform it through their presence. In reading 281-37, he described how these groups would become centers of healing, learning, and spiritual development that would attract others seeking deeper meaning in their lives. Through their example of living in harmony with spiritual law, they would demonstrate the possibility of a different way of being human. What's most striking about Cayce's prophecies is how they frame our current global challenges, not as signs of impending doom, but as labor pains preceding birth. The political upheaval, the environmental crises, the social unrest, all of it serves a divine purpose in his vision. These challenges are forcing humanity to question fundamental assumptions about how we organize our societies, how we relate to the natural world, and what it means to be human. The old consciousness that created these problems cannot solve them. New thinking, new awareness, new ways of being are required, and according to Cayce, the souls capable of this new consciousness are already here, already awakening, already beginning to demonstrate what becomes possible when human beings remember their divine nature. So, where does this leave us today? If Edgar Cayce's vision of the Second Coming is accurate, then we are living in the most extraordinary period in human history. We are witnessing the birth of a new kind of human being, the emergence of Christ consciousness on a planetary scale, the transformation of Earth itself into a realm where heaven and earth merge. But this transformation requires something from each of us. It asks that we release our attachment to the old world of separation and fear. It calls us to remember who we truly are beneath all the conditioning and programming. It invites us to step into our role as conscious co-creators of the new reality that is emerging. The Second Coming, in Cayce's vision, is not something that happens to us. It is something that happens through us, as us, when enough souls remember their divine nature and choose to express that nature in every moment of their lives. The Christ returns not as one person, but as awakened humanity itself. If this message resonates with something deep within you, if you feel the stirring of remembrance that these words describe, then you are part of the fulfillment of Edgar Cayce's greatest prophecy. You are among the souls who came to earth for this moment, carrying within your very being the seeds of humanity's transformation. The time of choosing is upon us. The great recognition approaches, and the Second Coming, that mystics have prophesied for millennia, is beginning to unfold through ordinary people like you, who are remembering that they are anything but ordinary. The question is not whether this awakening will occur. According to Cayce, it is already occurring. The question is whether you will recognize your part in it and step fully into the role you came here to play. Because in the end, the Second Coming is not about waiting for someone else to save the world. It is about awakening to the truth that you are here to help save it yourself.